German fighter pilots in early 1943 spot a strange silhouette gliding high above Europe. Two engines, two long booms stretching behind it like the rib cage of some mechanical beast. And in the middle, a cockpit pod that looks too small for the aircraft carrying it. Nothing about the plane resembles a normal fighter. To the Germans, it looks like a mistake, an over-engineered experiment, a design that shouldn't even be in the sky. They laugh at it over the radio, calling it clumsy, calling it too big, too heavy, too slow to turn a twin-engine fighter. Ridiculous. Fighters are supposed to be single-engine, sleek, compact. This American machine looks like it was built by someone who didn't understand combat. But minutes later, the laughter stops, because the plane they mocked suddenly levels out, rises with shocking power, and begins hunting them from 30,000 feet. This is the moment the Luftwaffe realizes the Americans have built something very different. The P-38 Lightning wasn't designed to look pretty. It was designed to break rules. Back in 1937, when the U.S. Army Air Corps demanded a fighter capable of reaching extreme altitudes, climbing faster than any rival, and carrying a weapon load that could shred bombers in seconds, Lockheed didn't try to improve old designs. They threw the entire rulebook away. They created a twin-engine monster with turbo superchargers that kept full power even in the thin air above the clouds. They put 4.50 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon directly in the nose, eliminating the spreading bullet pattern of wing-mounted guns. They built a frame strong enough to survive high-speed dives that would tear other fighters apart. And they gave it the range to escort bombers deep into enemy territory. Every engineer who saw the prototype called it insane. Every pilot who flew it called it revolutionary. And every German ace who underestimated it would eventually call it something else: deadly. When the P-38 arrived in Europe, German pilots didn't fear it. They dismissed it instantly. They assumed two engines meant sluggish performance, poor maneuverability, and slow response. They believed the new American fighter couldn't possibly compete with the agile Bf-109 or the vicious FW-190. To them, the Lightning was a large target just waiting to be picked apart. They would bank toward it confidently, expecting the P-38 to panic, to try to turn, to bleed energy, but that never happened. Instead, they watched in confusion as the Lightning refused to enter a traditional dogfight. It didn't try to outturn them. It didn't chase them in circles. It climbed higher, dove faster, and attacked on its own terms. And when it attacked, it hit with terrifying precision. One burst from its tightly grouped nose guns could slice through a fighter in half a second. There was no bullet spread, no wasted fire, just a concentrated beam of destruction that hit exactly where the pilot aimed, above 25,000 feet. The P-38 became something the Germans were completely unprepared for. Their engines struggled in the thin air, losing power, losing responsiveness, while the Lightning's turbo-supercharged Allison engines kept roaring at full strength. German pilots would try to climb away, but the P-38 could pursue them into the stratosphere. They would try to dive to safety, but the Lightning could follow them down faster than anything the Luftwaffe had. And if a German pilot tried to break off the engagement, the P-38's range and endurance meant the chase could continue for miles. The Luftwaffe had never faced a fighter like this. A fighter that didn't play the rules, a fighter that didn't give them the fight they wanted, a fighter that attacked from advantage and vanished before they could react. But the place where the P-38 earned its deadliest reputation wasn't Europe. It was the Pacific. Out there in endless skies stretching over blue water, the Lightning became a legend. Japanese pilots encountered it first over the Solomon Islands. They believed, just like the Germans, that the strange twin-boom fighter was too heavy to maneuver. They believed the Zero could outturn anything, and in a turning fight, that was true. But the Americans flying the P-38 never turned. They used altitude. They used speed. They used boom and zoom tactics to strike fast and disappear. Japanese pilots wrote in their diaries that chasing a Lightning was like trying to grab a ghost. The P-38 would appear from above, unleash a deadly burst of fire, and disappear back into the clouds before the Zero could even respond. Then came the mission that cemented the P-38's status as one of the most feared fighters of the war, Operation Vengeance. A mission so daring and so precise that even today it sounds like something from a movie American intelligence learned the exact route and time that Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the man who planned the attack on Pearl Harbor, would be flying between bases. Killing him would be a seismic blow to Japanese morale. But reaching him required flying 400 miles over open ocean at wave-top altitude without radio chatter, without being detected. No fighter in the world had that range, except the P-38 Lightning. The morning of the mission, 16 P-38 Lightnings took off from Guadalcanal, each carrying extra fuel tanks, each flown by a pilot who understood exactly what this flight meant. They skimmed just meters above the water to avoid radar, flying for hours in silence, staring at nothing but ocean and sky. The weight of the mission settled on them with every passing minute. If they miscalculated by even a few miles, they would miss Yamamoto entirely. If their engines overheated, they would fall into the sea. If they were spotted too early, the Japanese escort fighters would tear them apart. But not one of the pilots hesitated. They knew what they were carrying: American revenge. At the exact predicted moment, one of the P-38 pilots looked up and saw them, two Japanese bombers moving across the sky, escorted by 6 Zero fighters. This was it. The P-38s climbed from sea level to attack altitude in a single brutal surge. Engines howling, sun catching the metal of their twin booms, Yamamoto's escort fighters reacted instantly, peeling off to intercept, but they were too far away. The Americans were already in position. The P-38, flown by Rex Barber, dove toward the lead bomber. He fired a single burst. The nose guns ripped through the air, tearing into the bomber's wing, and fuselage flames erupted. The aircraft carrying Admiral Yamamoto rolled over, plunged toward the jungle below, and exploded. The Japanese military was stunned. Their most important strategic mind, the architect of Pearl Harbor, was dead, killed by a fighter they had once mocked. And the world now understood how far the P-38 could reach, how hard it could strike, and how deadly it was in the hands of pilots who knew how to use its speed, altitude, and firepower. Back in Europe, German pilots slowly began to realize the same truth. The P-38 wasn't a curiosity. It was a threat, a big one. Its long range meant it could escort bombers deep into Germany. Its high-altitude power meant it could meet interceptors head-on, and its firepower meant every hit was lethal. Luftwaffe aces who underestimated it paid the price. They tried to dogfight it like a single-engine fighter. They tried to lure it into turning battles. They tried to outrun it in dives, But the Lightning didn't fight like anything they had ever faced. It forced them into vertical combat, forced them into energy fights, forced them to defend instead of attack. And once the P-38 pilots mastered these tactics, German losses mounted. By 1944, the Luftwaffe gave the P-38 a new nickname, no longer a joke, no longer a curiosity, but a warning. They called it the Fork-tailed Devil, and this time they meant it. German pilots wrote that seeing its twin booms at high altitude was a sign of danger. Its presence meant the bombers were protected. Its presence meant the escort wouldn't run out of fuel. Its presence meant any mistake could be fatal for a fighter force already stretched thin, already losing veterans, already struggling to keep pace with America's industrial power. The P-38 was a nightmare, a fast, long-range, relentless nightmare. American aces thrived in the Lightning. Richard Bong became the highest-scoring American fighter ace of the entire war with 40 victories, all while flying P-38s. Thomas Maguire scored 38. Charles McDonald scored 27. These weren't average pilots. These were deadly hunters who used the Lightning's strengths to their absolute limit. They climbed above the enemy. They attacked from positions of advantage. They refused to turn fight. They fought smart. They fought disciplined. They fought to win. The P-38's impact stretched across continents. In North Africa, it dominated supply routes. In the Mediterranean, it escorted bombers through deadly flak corridors. In the Pacific, it hunted enemy aces and shut down Japanese logistics. Its versatility was unmatched. Reconnaissance variants photographed entire islands. From altitudes no Japanese fighter could reach. Night fighter variants stalked enemy aircraft under cover of darkness. Long-range escort variants protected bombers all the way to their targets and back again. The Lightning wasn't just a fighter. It was a toolbox of destruction capable of filling roles that would normally require an entire fleet of specialized aircraft. By the end of the war, the same German pilots who once mocked the P-38 had stopped laughing entirely. The strange twin-boom plane they dismissed as a design mistake had become one of the most respected and feared fighters in the sky. It hadn't won because it looked right. It hadn't won because it fought conventionally. It won because it broke the rules, because its pilots adapted, and because its designers dared to create something that didn't fit old ideas of what a fighter should be. While others clung to tradition, the Lightning embraced innovation, and innovation won the war. The P-38 Lightning was mocked. It was doubted, it was underestimated, but it outflew, outclimbed, outgunned, and outranged nearly everything it faced. It carried out the most precise aerial assassination of the entire conflict. It protected bombers across oceans. It produced the greatest American aces, and it forced both the Luftwaffe and the Imperial Japanese Navy to respect the plane they once laughed at. In the end, the pilot who underestimated a Lightning rarely got a second chance, because by the time they realized what it truly was, a high-altitude predator designed to hunt, the fight was already over. The Lightning had already struck, and the sky belonged to it.